Donnie.
We'll start recording and I'm going to do share screen.
Wonderful.
And you should see the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Elizabeth's in the waiting room. We'll let her in. Hello, Elizabeth. You there, Elizabeth? Hopefully you can hear us. Okay. So, where I came up with this presentation, nature, physics and stuff, scientific principles explain what's around us to a degree. How I came up with this is there are many things in nature related to astronomy, geology, biology, zoology, and other things that are also linked to physics, chemistry, and other branches of what we call the hard sciences. So sit back, put on your tinfoil hat, and witness some stunning examples of nature bumping elbows with hard science through the ages. But not chronologically. Not following a strict timeline here because it does not necessarily matter with the things that we are covering. The timeline doesn't really apply here. And looks like Carolyn, you dropped. We're readmitting. Are you back with us, Carolyn?
Oh, sorry, I had to chase a raccoon.
Oh, that's okay. You back with us?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're jumping around the timeline. And the first thing is we are starting in 1887 with Jean Agassiz theory of the ice ages. And his theory is, and it's held so far, during the past 600 million years, there have been 17 known ice ages. And his theory comes from scarring of mountain rocks that he witnessed on a vacation in the Swiss Alps. Striations that he saw and was able to document. And the causes are not definitively known, but some suspects include continental drifting, changes in atmospheric carbon dioxide, changes in Earth's orbit, and cosmic rays. But he was able to definitively document these striations to show that there have been at least 17 known ice ages. And that's where that came from. So then we jump to backwards, 1823, to Wilhelm Olber's paradox. And the question was, why is it dark at night? And he said, no, it is not because the sun is on the other side of the earth. He pointed out that if there are an infinite number of stars, then the sky should be equally bright everywhere all the time. And he said that at one point in time, and scientists today say this also, likely long before man was around, this was probably true. But in 1929, astronomers discovered that galaxies were moving away from us and that the universe is actually expanding. The surface light we are receiving at all hours from all stars and galaxies is actually steadily decreasing and has been for many eons. So the sun being on the other side of the Earth at night does definitely affect why we have darkness at night, but probably many eons ago, that was not the case because the galaxies and the stars were a lot closer to us all the time. So that was Olber's theory. Then jumping up a little bit to 1843, Samuel Schwab's sunspot cycles. Schwab was an amateur astronomer, and he recorded sunspot activity daily for 17 years. And after the 17 years, he announced that from his findings, sunspots stretch each one for a period of 11 years on average. They last that long. He then continued his research after that announcement for another 25 years with the same results. And scientists are fascinated about that they continue to find the same thing. However, they are not convinced that it might affect Earth's weather patterns, as many meteorologists believe. But they still hold to the fact that, yes, sunspots do tend to pop up and last for 11 years on average before they disappear. So that was discovered way back then, 1843. Next, jumping up a little bit to 1865, we had Gregor Mendel's laws of heredity. And Mendel was a botanist and Augustinian monk. He proved two laws that laid the foundations for modern genetics. First was his law of segregation. And that law said that in sexually reproducing organisms, 2 units of heredity control each trait. Only one of those units can be represented in a single sexually reproductive cell. For example, with people, say a trait of eye color or skin tone. And the second was the law of independent assortment, which says that each pair of contrasted traits may be combined either of another pair. And he proved his theories through years of record keeping on the characteristics of 28,000 pea plants in his experimental gardens. And he applied mathematics to his results. And those two things, law of segregation and law of independent assortment, what he called laws, are now known as genes and are referred to as the dominant and recessive genes in modern textbooks. So he has not forgotten these things still apply. And so dominant genes and recessive genes are still something that are followed and are studied and applied the same as how he found them in his studies of pea plants. And they applied to pretty much all living things. Any questions so far?
No.
So this is not something new. It was discovered quite a while ago. Next, we go way, way back in time to between 276 to 194 BC. And this is hard to pronounce. Eratosthenes' earth measurement. And this is pretty wild. He did an experiment where at noon on the summer solstice, somewhere in that time period, at noon on summer solstice, the sun is directly overhead in Syene, which is now Aswan, and there is no shadow. But at the same time in Alexandria, which, if I remember right, is in Egypt, the sun is at an angle, actually, and there is a measurable shadow. So from that simple concept, he had a measurement done in both places at that time. And he was able to prove from that the earth is curved, and was able to calculate the circumference of the earth, because from those measurements that he did and had done, he found that, as you see from this diagram, the angle between the sun and the overhead point, measured by the length of the shadow cast by a pole at Alexandria, was 7.2 degrees, while again there was no shadow at Aswan. So that 7.2 degrees indicated an actual curvature of the earth. And so that's how he was able to determine that the earth is round, and how he was able to calculate the total circumference of the earth. So that was an extremely long time ago, and was able to be determined by a very ingenious and very, very simple experiment. So then we jump way, way forward, 1600, to something that affects our everyday life, which is Gilbert's theory of magnetism. And now, long ago, prior to and up to this time, people believed that compass needles were magic or mystical, and that they pointed towards the heavens. They believed there was, something mystical and religious about it. Well, William Gilbert did many experiments that he published with magnetism, and believe it or not, way back then, about electricity. And he was able to prove and put in his published papers that the Earth's poles are actually magnetic. And he was able to prove that iron rods could be magnetized by forging them in a north-south direction. He further discovered and proved that if a magnet is cut in half, each half itself becomes a magnet. And he was also able to prove that if amber is rubbed with a suitable substance, such as iron, for example, it becomes magnetized. And a whole lot of other things. I'm just scratching the surface on this. He developed also the forerunner of the electroscope, which is used to measure the electrical properties of different substances. It is something that today is used to measure actually the degree of magnetism that a certain substance or a magnet or a piece of metal retains. or holds. And his book, De Magnete, is considered even to this day to be the first great scientific work on any subject that was published in English. So from him, it comes that our north and south poles are actually magnetic poles, and that the Earth, has a magnetic charge through its axis, and the Earth itself has a magnetic field around it. That all comes from him, and that was in 1600, quite a while ago. So then if we jump forward another 100 or so years, here we have Ingenhouse's theory of photosynthesis. Jan Ingenhouse was a Dutch-born British chemist, biologist, and physiologist. And he was the one actually who discovered the process of photosynthesis in plants through his research. He found that it only works in daylight, and that at night plants actually reverse the process. He was able, through his research, to prove that plants can convert solar energy into chemical energy, and in doing so can change energy poor compounds such as we know, carbon dioxide and water into energy rich sugar and oxygen. And today, biologists and chemists are trying to find a way, and are probably pretty close to finding a way, to use plants to actually generate solar energy. And were it not for Ingenhouse's work in photosynthesis, they would not be able to even come close to doing that. So, this goes back quite a ways that this was discovered, and it was pretty earth-shattering at the time. Any questions?
No, I just
Okay.
hadn't heard that theory before. Wow.
Okay, now we jump ahead another 100 years or so to savant Arrhenius, the greenhouse effect, which again, you may think is a really modern idea, but not so. It's a century old. Arrhenius proposed in 1896 his theory about the greenhouse effect. And we know now for a fact that the greenhouse effect is, as he proposed, caused by many heat trapping gases that we create directly or indirectly, including carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, which mostly comes from animals, ozone, and fluorocarbon. And these act as a thermal blanket around the planet. They increase the surface temperature. They make the planet more humid and create more rainy conditions. And according to scientists today, surface temperatures could rise by 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit on average in the next 50 years because of the greenhouse effect. And it just was really interesting to me that Arrhenius discovered and proposed this, a century ago, that this is not something brand new that was proposed and discovered in like the last 25 to 50 years. It's something that was proposed and discovered quite a while ago. Now, something that has always fascinated me, and this comes from also a very long time ago, 287 to 212 BC, the idea of pi. And it says that all circles are similar, obviously, and the ratio of the circumference to the diameter of a circle is always the same number, which makes sense, known as the constant pi. Now, it was first originally calculated way back in the BC by Archimedes. And it's been discussed and knocked around and so on through the centuries, and was finally definitively proven in 2002 by a Tokyo University mathematician, Yasumasa Kanada. And he did this by using a 1024 gigabyte memory computer. With that computer, it took 602 hours to calculate pi out to 124,100,000,000 decimal places. And that is the larger portion of the number you see at the bottom of the screen there. That's not the entire length of that number, but it's a good bit of it. So quite a feat, especially if you think about how many decimal places that must be and how many hours 602 hours actually is. And now I have saved the best for last, and this is, I think, the most mind-blowing. When I did a little presentation on this to some high school students in the spring, they had a very difficult time wrapping their head around this, and I did too when I first started studying it, and you probably will also. And from 1888, Heinrich Hertz's waves, and you probably heard of Hertz and megahertz. Hertz discovered and proved that all sound, light, color, radio, and other rays are electromagnetic in their existence. Now, we hear sound only in certain wavelengths. We see color only in certain wavelengths, as we will see in the next couple of slides. And all sound waves are measured in hertz, named after him, which the abbreviation for that is Hz. Everybody's heard of hertz?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this is where it'll start to really kind of mess your mind up. Here is a chart of the visible and also invisible spectrum. Starting on the left, the fastest wavelengths, which we cannot see, gamma rays. And then next to that, X-rays. Next to that, ultraviolet rays, which everybody knows about. Then the little tiny portion there, visible light, which goes from the blues through to the reds on the right. Then next to that, as the waves tend to slow down, we have infrared, which we cannot see. Then next to that, we have radio waves, which includes radar rays or waves, TV, FM, and AM waves, the slowest. Okay, so all that's going on out there all the time, and all that we can see are the visible. And where this gets hard to comprehend is all of those waves actually, they make sound.
Hmm.
They make sound. We
Hmm.
cannot hear, now we can hear TV, FM, and AM waves.
Mhm.
They are within our range of hearing, but all those others make sound that we cannot hear.
Hmm.
So color actually has a sound. We just can't hear it. And now I've given what the sound wave ranges are here for different colors. And just for an example, orange, the calculation of hertz for orange is 490 hertz times 10 to the 12th power. So if you look at the calculation on the left there, 490 times 10 times 12, and 10 times 12 is 120. So it's 490 times 120, which comes out to 58,800 hertz. So orange light waves vibrate or travel, if you will, at 58,800 waves per second. We can see that, but we cannot hear it. So when you see something that's orange, that's not something physical. And what I mean is when you touch something that you see as orange, that's not an actual physical thing. That is a vibration of light waves. That's not a physical thing like stone, for example, or water. You're touching vibrating light waves. So it's not an actual physical thing. Can you understand that?
Mhm.
It's really, really kind of weird to wrap your head around.
Basically, what you're saying is the waves produce the color.
Yes, the
Okay.
waves produce the color.
It's like the waves produce the sound.
Right. It's like if you just hold your hand up and grab into the air, you're not really grabbing air, and you can't
Mhm.
really grab color either because it's waves.
Wow.
It's light waves. It's hard to wrap your head around, but that is the fact of it.
Mhm.
It like I said, and that does produce a sound. It's just that it's so very fast we cannot hear it.
Hmm.
What we are capable of hearing is between 20 and 20,000 hertz.
Okay.
So orange is like 58,800 hertz. It's way above what we would be able to hear.
Hmm. Okay.
So now to kind of put this in perspective of what we are able to hear, if you look at a pickup on a guitar, and everybody's seen a guitar or a microphone, the way they are able to pick up sound is they actually respond to vibration. Both a guitar pickup and a microphone of any type, they have inside a thin coil of copper wire that is wound about 100 or so times around a magnet. And that picks up the vibrations of a human voice or an instrument or the strings on the guitar. And that converts those sound waves, it picks up those sound waves within that 20 to 20,000 hertz of wavelengths that we can hear. and it is amplified in a radio, a TV, a DVD player, a guitar amplifier, or other device using vacuum tubes and or power transformers. And that sends the signals through wires to, on the right, a magnet in the center of a paper cone, which is what a speaker is. Wires that are attached to that magnet are attached to the center of that paper cone with glue. And that creates vibrations. And those wires vibrating on that cone from the magnet creates the sounds, the voices, and the music that you hear. So it's reproducing what happens in the natural world. So now I have a little demonstration, and I am going to stop sharing at this point. Now, to show you, this is a pickup out of a guitar. And this is two magnets with metal pieces that are called pole pieces that are sticking up, just pieces of steel sticking up through the magnets. And now this is covered over, but there on each one of these magnets, there's about 100 what's called windings of copper wound around each one, and it goes clockwise around one, counterclockwise around the other, and then the end of the wire comes out here, and that attaches to the controls on the guitar. That's what the backside looks like. And then that goes through cable on the guitar, and it goes through the amplifier, and then the amplifier has a speaker. Okay, and on the back of the speaker, you've got a magnet here. And attached to the magnet is, you can see this, two wires. And you can see, like right here, the wires, see that down in there? The wires are attached to this paper cone in the center, and they are glued from the center of the paper cone out into the middle of the paper cone. And when the instrument is played, the wires vibrate the paper cone from the magnet, and that's how you get the sound. So I'm gonna move out of the way here. Here's a little guitar amplifier, okay? And I turn that on, and I've got a guitar plugged into it here. And now the guitar has two of those pickups, like I just showed you. And when I strum the strings, those pickups, they catch the vibration of the strings. And the vibrations are caught by those pickups, and they go through the controls, and they go through this cable that goes up into the amplifier, and they go to that speaker. It's a larger speaker than the one I showed you, but it goes through the speaker, which picks up the vibration, and you get the sound. And you're able to hear that because the range is between the 20,000, the 20 and the 20,200 hertz. So that's how that is applied. And the eardrum of a person, an animal, works very similar. The tympanic membrane in the eardrum works very similar to this paper cone
Mhm.
in the speaker, except that it receives sound instead of sending sound. And the little trigger hairs, if you will, that are in the ear, inside the ear, the inner ear, are the same as these little wires
Hmm.
in the speaker, and they serve the same function. They vibrate against that membrane in the inner ear, and they, instead of sending sound, cause you to hear the sound within that same range of waves. So it's the same process without a magnet, but it works the same way.
So does the magnet work as a differentiator? Because you have so many different waves coming together.
No, the magnet just works on either end of that process, because again, the waves, the sound waves, are themselves electromagnetic.
Oh, okay.
All of, if I can go back a screen, all of,
Mhm.
if it will let me, all right, what happened? Nope, what's going on here? All of the rays in the field, regardless of whether we can hear them or see them or not, they are all electromagnetic.
Okay.
They are all electromagnetic, as Hertz discovered. Whether they can be seen, whether they can be heard, they are all electromagnetic in nature.
Hmm.
That is why the magnet in the guitar pickup, in the speaker, in the microphone, that is why they all work.
Okay.
Because this is magnetic. That is why a radio antenna or a radio tower
Hmm.
is able to send and receive, because it's metal, and because those waves
Oh,
are electromagnetic.
okay.
And although our ears are not metal, are not electromagnetic, they are designed that they pick up those waves.
Mhm.
The shape of a human or an animal ear is designed to pick up waves within the range of hearing. The human ear, for example, funnels those waves within that spectrum into the inner ear channel. And if you look at, like deer, for example, have way better hearing than what we do. And if you look at the shape of their ear, it funnels sound waves into their inner ear much more efficiently than what ours does, which is why they have much better hearing than we do. They can hear something a lot farther off in the distance than what we can. Any other questions? Very interesting and very hard to comprehend at first, isn't it?
Yes, that is.
So yes, it blinded me with science when I first discovered it.
Mhm.
As a musician playing for many, many years and not realizing how
Mhm.
and why that all worked. Okay, well, I will stop the sharing then. Anybody have any questions on anything in the presentation?
Just how does it work that all different sounds come together as one? It's like when you think of an orchestra, each one of those instruments is causing this vibration to make this sound, and somehow we combine them all together in our ear.
I'll tell you what, I am reading a very interesting book uh, right now called This Is Your Brain on Music. And it is written by this man who is a physiologist and musicologist, and he has studied this for a very long time. And a lot of it has an awful lot to do with neuroscience and how it's such a complex thing, how
Nervous.
the neurons in the
Mhm.
brain handle uh, what the ears hear, and what the different sounds, where the neurons send what it picks up into different parts of the brain, to the different parts of the cerebellum and so on, and how it chains them together. It's what the brain does with them is very, very complex. And some of it processes as emotional things, and some of it processes as
Wow.
things that are more related to uh, not emotional, but things as far as intellect and interest and so on. But there's like, when you listen to a piece of music, there's like literally hundreds of thousands of interactions between your synapses and your neurons in the brain, and
Oh, yeah.
this whole network of what goes where.
Yeah.
and,
It's
and it's
interesting you can train that too, because we
yeah,
had to take music apart in our heads. That was,
I'm reading this book very slowly because it is for somebody that doesn't that's a lay person. It's really hard to grasp.
well, I understand that.
I could probably, from what I've learned about it, I could probably do several programs just on what I understand so far, which is just the tip of the iceberg.
Hmm.
Anybody have any other questions? If not, I know Christy's got some things to talk about.
Yay, Christy.
Yeah, well, I don't really have anything prepared, but I was starting to say before we went